The research station Aurora Deep floated in the silent darkness at the edge of known space, its silver frame glinting faintly under the cold light of distant stars. Inside the medical wing, Dr. Kieran Holt worked alone, his gloved hands steady. As he guided the scanner over a small vial of crimson blood, the blood belonged to a young human pilot they had rescued hours ago from a pirate. Ambushed near the Hellion Rift. The pilot was alive but unconscious. Her name, Ava Soren, her breathing shallow as she lay on the medbed behind him. Kieran expected to find elevated adrenaline, maybe traces of alien nanites from the pirate's weapons. What he didn't expect was for the scanner to start screaming, its display flashing bright red with a word he had never thought he'd see. Outside Ancient Data Archives Navasite, his mouth went dry. Navasite wasn't just rare, it was the single most dangerous element ever known in the galaxy. It was unstable beyond reason, and so destructive that a piece no larger than a grain of dust could vaporize an entire moon. No species had ever successfully created it in a lab. The Galactic Council had banned its research millennia ago, fearing that even the smallest accident would end civilizations. Yet here it was, not in a weapon, not in a container, flowing naturally in Ava's blood. Kieran rechecked the sample, then checked again, his mind refusing to believe the data. The spectral readings were unmistakable. The signature peaks matched perfectly. It was something stranger, embedded within the molecular structure of her hemoglobin, like it had been part of her biology from birth. It pulsed faintly on the monitor, as if it were alive, responding to her heartbeat. He whispered under his breath, This should not be possible." His first thought was to alert the station's command, but the second thought came fast and cold. If the council knew about this, they wouldn't just come for Ava. They would come for all humans. He glanced back at her still form. She looked fragile, pale, nothing like a threat to the galaxy. But in her veins, she carried enough power to wipe out worlds. Kieran moved quickly, slipping the vial into a secure cryolock and setting the medbay's privacy protocols. The station's lights hummed softly above him, the constant background thrum of life support systems filling the silence. But then something changed. The hum deepened, almost imperceptibly. A faint static crackled in his cum, like whispers brushing past his ear. He froze. The security feed on the wall monitor flickered, showing the corridor outside the medbay. 3 figures stood at the far end, cloaked in fabric that seemed to drink in the light. Their faces were hidden behind smooth black masks, and they didn't move like ordinary beings. They seemed to slide across the floor without sound. Kieran's pulse spiked. The Aurora Deep was a deep research station. Visitors had to pass through 3 layers of security, and these figures weren't supposed to be here. He tried to open the cum to security, but the channel was dead. The cloaked figures began walking toward the medbay, slow and deliberate. A cold shiver crawled up his spine. These weren't pirates or scavengers. He had heard rumors and whispered. Bars across the rim, the Null Order. Assassins who erased evidence, eliminated witnesses, and left nothing but silence behind. If they were here, it meant one thing: they already knew what he had discovered. The lights above flickered once, then went out. Only the emergency glow strips lit the room in a sickly red. The scanner screen dimmed, the heart monitor on Ava's bed dropping to a low hum. Through the darkness, a voice echoed over the medbay speaker, soft, calm, and cold enough to make Kieran's skin prickle. "Doctor, we know what you found." His breath caught in his throat. He turned to Ava. She was still unconscious, unaware of the danger surrounding her. His mind raced. The Navasite in her blood wasn't just a scientific miracle, it was a death sentence if it fell into the wrong hands. The wrong hands were already here. He reached under the bed for the emergency lockbox, pulling out a compact medbed transport. A hover stretcher used for rapid evacuation. As quietly as he could, he transferred Ava onto it, sealing her under a protective field. The emergency lights bathed the room in a blood-red glow as the whisper came again, closer this time. Almost inside his ear. "You cannot hide her. You cannot hide it. Surrender, and you may live." Kieran ignored it, his hands moving fast, sealing the cryolock vial into his lab coat. He pushed the hover stretcher toward the side hatch of the medbay, bypassing The main corridor entirely. Behind him, the main door's locking mechanism hissed, metal bending under silent pressure. Whoever the Null Order were, they weren't waiting for authorization. They were coming through. The side hatch slid open into a narrow maintenance tunnel. Kieran pushed the stretcher inside and sealed the hatch behind him, his heart pounding. In his ears, he could feel the cold presence of the cloaked figures even through the walls. The tunnel was dim, filled with the faint scent of coolant and metal. Each turn felt like a maze, but Kieran knew the station's schematics by heart. He had one goal now: to Ava to the docking bay and off this station before they were both dead. As he rounded the last corner, an emergency klaxon blared, loud enough to shake the walls. The station's AI voice rang out. Security breach in Sector 3. Life signs terminated in medical wing. Kieran's blood ran cold. The Null Order had reached the med bay. They would know which direction he had gone. Somewhere behind him, faint footsteps echoed in the tunnel's slow, measured, unhurried. The kind of steps made by hunters who knew their prey had nowhere to run. Kieran gritted his teeth, forcing himself to move faster. He had no idea how much time he had before the assassins caught up. But deep down, he knew one thing. This was no longer about research. This was about survival for him, for Ava, and maybe for the entire human race. The maintenance tunnel sloped downward, its narrow walls trembling as the station's alarms wailed in deep, pulsing tones. Dr. Kieran Holt pushed the hover stretcher as fast as it would glide. The hum of its repulsors barely audible over the warning sirens. Ava lay beneath the protective field, still pale, her dark hair spilling over the pillow like spilled ink. Her breathing was steady now, but her heartbeat was oddly rhythmic, too perfect, like it was syncing with some invisible pulse in the air. Kieran's every step felt heavier, not just from exhaustion, but from the knowledge of what was at stake. The Null Order wasn't just here to take Ava. They were here to erase the evidence she existed. They wouldn't kill her until they understood the novicite in her blood, but they would kill him without hesitation. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The tunnel behind was empty, dimly lit by red emergency strips. But he knew better. The Null Order didn't run. They closed in like shadows, inevitable and patient. He reached an intersection in the tunnel, a narrow vertical shaft leading to the station's cargo lift. Normally it was locked down for security, but the AI's voice suddenly echoed through the metal walls. Security override detected. All access restrictions removed in Sector 3. Kieran's heart sank. That wasn't the station helping him, that was the Null Order rewriting the system. The lift would be open. For them, he pulled Ava's stretcher toward a side conduit. Instead, an old maintenance crawl space that ran parallel to the docking bay's outer hall. It was narrow and unlit, the kind of place most crew avoided unless repairs were necessary. As he entered, the sound hit him, first a low, vibrating hum, almost like a heartbeat coming from Ava. He slowed just enough to check the stretcher's monitor. The novicite traces in her blood were spiking, glowing faintly on the readout. Kieran's brow furrowed. She was still unconscious, yet her body was reacting to something. He leaned closer and noticed a faint shimmer dancing across her skin beneath the protective field, like ripples in water. The air in the crawl space felt warmer now, heavier, charged with static. He didn't know whether it was some kind of defense mechanism or a dangerous reaction, but it made him move faster. The crawl space led to an access hatch overlooking Docking Bay 4. Through the small reinforced viewport, he saw Chaos security drones in pieces, sparks raining from the ceiling, and a massive bulkhead door, half melted by some kind of energy weapon. Two cloaked figures glided across the floor, their movements unnervingly smooth, black masks reflecting the firelight of the wreckage. And then he saw the third figure, taller, slower, carrying something that shimmered faintly in the dark. It was a containment sphere, and Kieran knew instantly it was for Ava. His throat tightened. If they reached the docking bay's only functioning escape shuttle before him, it was over. He turned back to Ava, whispering urgently, though she couldn't hear him. "We're not dying here. Not like this." He activated the hatch release. The panel resisted at first. It hadn't been used in years, but with a loud metallic groan, It slid open. The sound was enough to make one of the cloaked figures tilt its head toward him. No words, no shouts. Just that slow, deliberate turn that made his skin crawl. Kieran pushed the stretcher through and leaped after it, landing hard on the bay's upper catwalk. The null order moved instantly, gliding forward with impossible speed. He didn't think he just ran, shoving the stretcher toward the shuttle's boarding ramp. His legs burned, his lungs ached. But the sight of the cloaked figures gaining ground burned hotter in his mind. Halfway there, a shadow dropped from the ceiling in front of him. One of the assassins landed silently, blocking the path. It was featureless, but Kieran swore he could feel its gaze cutting straight through him. It raised one hand and the air rippled, distorting like heat haze. The hover stretcher jerked violently to the side, metal screeching against the floor. Kieran gripped the stretcher's control bar and roared with effort, forcing it forward against the invisible pull. The assassin tilted its head again, almost curious, before tightening its grip on the air itself. The stretcher was nearly ripped from Kieran's hands until a deep, resonant thrum shook the entire docking bay. Ava's eyes snapped open. They glowed not with any color Kieran had ever seen, but with pure white light so bright it painted the assassin's mask in ghostly shades. The shimmering over her skin flared into an expanding sphere of light, and the Null Order member stumbled back, its perfect movements suddenly jerky, as though fighting gravity. The other two assassins froze mid-step. For the first time, they seemed unsure. Kieran didn't wait to understand what was happening. "Ava, hold on," he shouted, shoving the stretcher onto the shuttle ramp. The white light around her pulsed again, and the Null Order moved, but slower now, as though every motion cost them more effort. He slammed his palm against the shuttle's door control. The ramp began to rise, just as one assassin lunged forward, its black-gloved hand swiping through the narrowing gap. It missed by inches. Inside the shuttle, Kieran stumbled into the pilot's seat. Starting the launch sequence with shaking hands, Ava lay silent again, the light fading from her skin, as if nothing had happened. Outside, the cloaked figures simply stood, watching, unmoving, as the shuttle's engines roared to life. Kieran had no idea where he was going. He only knew one thing: the Null Order would not stop, and whatever Ava Soren was, the galaxy would never be the same. The stars streaked into long lines as the shuttle's hyperdrive engaged. But Dr. Kieran Holt didn't feel relief, only the crushing weight of borrowed time. The Null Order's cloaked assassins would not be far behind. They had resources. Ships faster than anything he could fly. Worst of all, dash patience. Ava lay on the stretcher in the small medical bay, still pale but no longer unconscious. Her eyes were half open, focused on something far away, as though she could see beyond the shuttle's hull. Kieran crouched beside her, scanning her vitals again. The Novosite readings were still fluctuating wildly, spiking, then settling, then spiking again. No known physiology behaved like that. "What happened back there?" he asked quietly, though he knew she might not answer. Her gaze slowly shifted toward him, but her voice was a whisper. "They felt me." Kieran froze. "Felt you? Who? The ones in black? The hunters?" She blinked slowly, as if pulling herself out of a dream. "They weren't trying to kill me yet. They wanted to know if it was true." "What was true?" "That I have the element." Her voice trembled on the last word, as if it tasted dangerous even to say. Kieran leaned closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper Novosite. "That's not an element, Ava. It's a classified particle. Human-made isotope that's unstable in every environment except..." He stopped himself. He wasn't sure he wanted to finish that thought. "Except inside me," she said softly, finishing it for him. The shuttle's console beeped sharply. Kieran moved to the cockpit, glancing at the nav display. Something was following them to fast-moving signatures on long-range scan. Too far to confirm, but his gut told him they were Null Order interceptors. He pushed the shuttle harder, rerouting auxiliary power to the engines. But the proximity alarm continued its slow, steady pulse. They were gaining. He opened a secure "Come channel." This is Dr. Kieran Holt, requesting immediate docking clearance to Outpost K-47. Medical emergency. Priority, a harsh voice cut in. Dr. Holt, this frequency is restricted. How did you know time? Kieran snapped. I have a patient with unstable novosite resonance. Being pursued by the voice on the other end went silent. For a moment, when it returned, it was calmer, but colder. You have 60 seconds to transmit proof. Kieran glanced toward the medbay. Ava's readings were spiking again, faint light flickering over her skin. That might be proof enough, but transmitting it meant broadcasting her condition into the galaxy's data stream. The null order could intercept. Before he could decide, Ava's voice came from behind him. Don't go to them. He turned. She was standing now, swaying slightly but awake. They'll lock me away. I'll never see the stars again. They'll keep you safe, Kieran said, though the words felt hollow. Her eyes were steady on his. The null order isn't the only group hunting me. Outpost K-47 will take me apart to see how I work. You know that. The proximity alarms. Tone changed higher, faster. The interceptors were now within visual range, to sleek black ships with no visible markings, sliding through the void like predators. Kieran cursed under his breath, cutting the cum and throwing the shuttle in two. A steep course change. The stars tilted violently outside the viewport. The interceptors followed without hesitation. Ava stepped forward, placing a hand on the bulkhead. The metal around her fingers shimmered faintly. Kieran stared. What are you doing? Trying. Something, she said, her voice distant again. Outside, the black ships drew closer, then slowed. One of them suddenly veered off course, drifting sideways as if caught in a gravity well that didn't exist. Kieran's jaw tightened. That's impossible. Ava's eyes glowed faintly. Not for me. He didn't ask questions. He pushed the shuttle's engines to maximum, diving toward the shadow of a nearby asteroid belt. The second interceptor tried to follow, but its systems flickered, then it simply stopped, floating dead in space by the time they entered the dense cover. Of tumbling rocks, both pursuers were gone. Kieran exhaled for the first time in minutes. You just saved us. Ava shook her head. No, I just told them where I am. The asteroid belt was a labyrinth of spinning stone and frozen metal, some chunks no bigger than a fist, others the size of small moons. The shuttle's hull groaned. As debris scraped past, leaving thin scars in the plating, Dr. Kieran Holt kept the ship weaving through narrow gaps. But his mind was racing faster than the engines. They had lost the null order for now. But Ava's last words kept echoing. Just told them where I am. He glanced back into the medbay. She sat in the chair now, arms crossed, eyes closed, breathing slow and deliberate. Her skin still carried that faint shimmer in the light. Scan he'd run told him the same impossible thing. The novosite wasn't just inside her, was alive in her blood. As if bonded to her cells in a way no lab had ever achieved. A loud ping from the console snapped him out of his thoughts. An enemy lock. Something worse. The radar showed dozens of faint blips emerging from the asteroid field ahead. Their movements were erratic, zigzagging like a swarm of insects. He tapped the magnification controls. The blips resolved into small, dart-shaped craft-autonomous drones. Mining drones? Kieran murmured to himself. But mining drones didn't move like this. These were predatory. The cum crackled with an open broadcast on all channels. A distorted voice bled through, neither male nor female, warped as if spoken underwater. Human vessel. Stop engines. Deliver the source. This is your only warning. Kieran's fingers tightened on the controls. Who is this? The voice repeated the demand, slower this time. Deliver the source. Ava stepped into the cockpit, leaning against the frame. They're not null order. Then who? They're scavengers, she said simply. They hunt for rare materials in the outer sectors, and are more valuable than any asteroid here. The drones began to spread out, circling. A few zipped between asteroids, cutting off potential escape paths. Kieran's brain ran through scenarios. The shuttles. Weapons were minimal, mainly point defense lasers for debris. Against dozens of drones, they'd be shredded in seconds. Can you do what you did to the interceptors? He asked. Ava's expression tightened. Maybe, but the more I use it, the more I burn through myself. Novicite isn't meant to be awake like this. The swarm closed in. Bright red targeting beams flickered across the shuttle's hull. Kieran flipped a switch, extending the ship into a sudden dive toward a spinning asteroid the size of a stadium. The swarm followed, some smashing into the rock, others skimming dangerously close. "Hold on," he muttered. Twisting the shuttle between jagged peaks of stone, one drone zipped ahead, aiming directly for the cockpit. Ava moved before Kieran could shout, her hands stretched out toward the viewport. Light rippled outward, invisible waves bending space for a heartbeat. The drone froze mid-flight, spinning helplessly before shattering into pieces. But the effort cost. Kieran saw her knees buckle. The cum crackled again, the distorted voice sounding sharper now. "Deliver the source, or die," he pushed. The engines harder, searching the asteroid map for anything they could use. Then he saw it. A deep, gravitational sinkhole, where two massive rocks were locked in a slow collision. "Ava," he said, "hold on." The shuttle dove toward the sinkhole, the swarm chasing close behind. As they neared the gravity pocket, debris began to accelerate wildly, chunks of rock smashing together with explosive force. The drones didn't adjust in time. Half of them slammed into the collapsing rocks. Bursting into shards, the survivors pulled back, scattering. Kieran guided the shuttle through a narrow tunnel between the colliding masses, emerging into open space on the other side. They were alive. Again. But Ava's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "They won't stop. The more we run, the more the word spreads. They all want the same thing." Kieran swallowed hard. "Then we find someone who can help us, before they all catch up." Ava's eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly in the dark. "And before the Novicite decides it doesn't want me alive anymore." The station floated in the shadow of a dying star, its metal skin pitted and scarred from centuries of neglect. From a distance, it looked abandoned, just another relic drifting in the void. But as Kieran guided the shuttle toward the docking ring, faint lights blinked alive. The airlocks unfolded like the petals of some mechanical flower. Ava stood behind him, silent, her gaze locked on the looming structure. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice low. "No," Kieran admitted, "but Yolan owes me, and if anyone can hide us, it's him." They docked with a hiss of pressure equalization. The interior was dim and smelled faintly of rust and recycled air. A man appeared in the shadows, tall, wiry, with hair silvered not by age but by radiation burns. His eyes lit up when he saw Kieran. "You're either brave or desperate to come here," Yolan said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Or both." Kieran offered a strained smile, bit of both. Jalen's gaze shifted to Ava. Lingering for a moment, he didn't ask who she was, but Kieran saw the sharp calculation in his eyes. People like Yolan didn't survive long by being slow to notice things. Inside, Jalen's command chamber, circular room cluttered with old star maps, cum units, and the occasional illegal weapon. Kieran explained the situation. He didn't hold back about the Novicite in Ava's blood, about the Null Order, about the scavengers in the asteroid belt. Jale leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. When Kieran finished, he whistled softly. "You're telling me she's carrying the most valuable and dangerous material in the known galaxy. And you brought her here?" "You're the only one I trust," Kieran said. "That's flattering," Yolan replied. "But trust doesn't pay for the kind of trouble. You've just docked in my lap." Ava finally spoke. "You want something?" Jalen's grin widened. "Always. I can hide you. Sure. I can even get you off the radar for a while, but it's going to cost you. There's a warlord 3 systems over who's hoarding ancient tech from before the collapse. I want one of his vault keys. You get me that? I'll get you safe passage to the inner sectors." Kieran stared at him. "You're asking us to steal from a warlord while the whole galaxy's hunting us?" "I'm asking you to survive," Yolan said simply. Ava stepped forward, her eyes faintly glowing in the low light. "And what if I say no?" "Then you're welcome to take your chances out there," Yolan said, gesturing toward the starfield. "The Null Order won't stop. Neither will the scavengers. And when the syndicates hear about you, they'll send fleets." Kieran and Ava exchanged a glance. It wasn't really a choice. "Fine," Kieran said. "We'll do it." Gallons. Grin faded into something colder. "Good, I'll give you the coordinates. But you should know something. The warlord you're going after doesn't just keep vaults. He keeps trophies. He likes rare things." His eyes flicked toward Ava. "You'd better hope he doesn't decide to add you to the collection." The words hung in the stale air. Ava didn't flinch, but Kieran felt the weight of them like a stone in his chest. Outside, the dying star flared briefly, casting long shadows across the station. Somewhere far away, the hunt for them continued. No, they were walking straight into the jaws of something far worse. The warlord's fortress loomed over the barren. Moon like a wound in the landscape, vast black towers bristling with gun emplacements. Shield generators humming with lethal energy. The outer walls shimmered faintly in the thin atmosphere, a sign of active defensive fields. No ship could land without clearance. And clearance was something Kieran and Ava would never get. They approached in the oldest trick in the book, hidden. Inside a cargo hauler, buried under crates of scrap metal and engine parts, Jalen's smuggler contact flew them close enough to the docking bay to bluff a parts delivery before disappearing into the void, leaving them to crawl out into the warlord's domain. The air inside was hot and dry, heavy with the scent of burned metal. The halls were patrolled by towering guards clad in segmented armor, each armed with weapons older than the fortress itself. Ava moved silently, her breathing steady, but Kieran could feel the tension radiating from her. Their objective was deep inside a vault buried under layers of security, holding the warlord's most valuable treasures. The vault key Yalan wanted was there. So was something else, something Ava had felt since they'd landed. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. The fortress seemed almost alive, walls pulsing faintly with light, floors humming, like they carried more than just power conduits. And in Ava's blood, the Novicite began to stir at the final security gate. It hit the first real obstacle: 3 guards and a biometric scanner tied to the warlord's own DNA. There was no way to hack it without. The lights flickered. The air grew colder. And then Ava stepped forward. Her eyes glowed brighter, and when she touched the scanner, it recognized her. Not as an intruder, as an heir. The gates slid open without a sound. Inside, the vault stretched, like a cathedral, towering shelves stacked with alien artifacts, ancient weapons, preserved creatures from 100 worlds. And at the center, under a stasis field, sat a crystalline sphere the size of a human heart. It pulsed with the same deep, impossible blue as Ava's veins. Kieran stared. "That's not what is," Ava said softly. "It's Novicite, pure, unrefined." A voice boomed from the shadows. "And it belongs to me." The warlord stepped forward, his armor a jagged crown of metal and bone, his face hidden behind a mask etched with old runes. "I have been waiting for you, Ava Hale. You are not the first of your kind, but you may be the last." Kieran raised his weapon, but the warlord didn't even look at him. His attention was fixed entirely on Ava. "You carry the final fragment of the source," he said. "That sphere is the seed. Your blood is the soil. Together they can create a new sun ore, burn a galaxy to ash." Ava's pulse thundered in her ears. She didn't understand all of it, but she understood enough. This wasn't just about value. This was about power. Power no one should hold. The warlord stepped closer. "Give it to me, and I will make you a queen in the empire that rises. Refuse, and I will cut it from your veins." For a long moment, the vault was silent, except for the slow, steady pulse of the sphere. Then Ava smiled not kindly. "I think I'll pass." The Novicite in her blood erupted light so bright it burned shadows into the walls. The stasis field shattered, and the sphere shot into her hands like it had been waiting for her all along. The warlord roared, lunging forward, but Kieran fired, and the blast sent the towering figure crashing into a display of ancient armor. The vault began to shake. Lights burst, alarms wailed, and Ava grabbed Kieran's arm. "Run!" They tore through the collapsing fortress as explosions chased them down the corridors. The sphere in Ava's hands pulsed faster, hotter, until the walls themselves seemed to melt around them. They barely made it to the docking bay before the entire upper tower erupted in a plume of fire and light as their stolen ship lifted off. Kieran glanced at Ava. She sat in the co-pilot's seat, the sphere cradled in her lap, its glow seeping into her skin. "What now?" he asked. Ava's eyes were bright, unreadable. "Now we find out what this thing really is. And then we decide if the galaxy gets to survive." Far behind them, the warlord's fortress burned against the moon's dark surface. It in Ava's hands was something far more dangerous than any army, a choice that could change the fate of every star.